I'm yes. Introduction. Yes. It's chatting up the chick. Woohoo! Yeah. We're on episode 7. It's Sky Horton in the house. She's going to be talking to us about regenerative farming, and we've just actually been talking for like the last 15 minutes, and we really got into quite a fun discussion. We was talking about veganism and how Sky has just become a vegan in the last 2 weeks, and I was telling her how my podcast with my mate went terribly wrong. I was talking about erections from veganism. For anyone seen the program Game Changers, you'll know what I'm talking about. But yeah, we got to veganism, and you were saying, Sky, about I don't know, what was you saying? I completely went on a tangent.
I'll fill it in. Yeah, I was saying how I've just like sort of tapped into the whole vegan thing for the last 2 weeks, but I'm not a I'm not a strict vegan by any means. I think, like from a health perspective, it's really important to eat less meat, but again, it's all about balance. But yeah, I think we were just going. I was sort of saying, because I work for hunting and fishing, that
Do you want me to bleep that out? Do you want me to bleep that out? Just like
no.
say something really bad about it. Like,
No.
She works for Beep. Yeah, oh, nice place.
No. But like I just feel like, hey, it's the lesser of two evils. I feel like hunting is okay, so it's the most oldest form of hunter gathering that you can do, like shooting animal, fishing for a fish. Compare it to agriculture, where it's very, especially intensive factory farming agriculture. You take your baby calf away from its mum at 24 hours. It's either shot there and then because it's a bull calf, or it's put onto a trailer and carted away for probably 24 hours in confinement before it's taken to another farm and reared as veal, where it can't move, or it's got about 1 meter and it's reared for probably 3 months maybe until it's killed and sold as McDonald's meat. Or if it's lucky, it lives and then it spends the rest of its 3 years of life, no, maybe up to 5 to 7, milking and pregnant pretty much all the time. And so then it dies and you eat it again. And like for me, you could either eat that animal product, or you could, go into the mountains and pick off a deer at 300 meters that's been living its life, foraging and having all the sex it wants and eating herbs and living the life, like
freedom.
Life. And then you shoot it in the head, it doesn't even know what's happened, and you're picking off one animal as opposed to farming all these other animals at once for one portion of meat. So yeah, I guess that's kind of, and then not to mention the whole environmental impacts, but that's probably another story.
Oh yes, we'll certainly be getting into that. Don't worry about that. So your kind of delve into veganism, was that based around more the ethical side, or was it actually because someone said, "Oh yeah, you could be really healthy with this"? Is it because you watched Game Changers and you was like, "Oh yeah, can have muscles the size of Arnie," and well, not so much the you know what I'm saying, but
Yeah. Oh my god. I kind of always just wanted the challenge. And yeah, definitely from a health perspective, like or at least adopting a more plant-based diet is probably more what I'm trying to do, and cut out dairy. Because it's like, why would you want to drink mammary secretions from another mammal past the age of weaning? I just don't get it. Like, we're not supposed to be doing that. We're not baby cows.
It reminds me of Little Britain with Bitty. It's like, how many fully grown adults do you see going around still suckling on their mother?
Yes. It just doesn't make sense, and it's gross. I mean, it's gross. If you actually know what is in milk, it's you know, it's like it's gross. It's pasta and
I just thought it was calcium, and that was it.
yeah, which is so ridiculous. It's like calcium in a pint of milk is like 1 to 14 ratio, and in a stick of broccoli it's like 1 to 2. So you're gonna get more calcium out of a stick of broccoli than you will a pint of milk. By the way, everyone. So yeah, I'll just let that stew with you there.
It's been stewing in the stomach for a long time now. I'm
Yeah.
curdling.
Yeah. So yeah, but you've been on the journey. You've been on the journey for how long, Chris? The old vegan journey.
So I became a vegetarian about 8 years ago. When I was in my early 30s, and
when, sorry?
early, and I was I was like you. I got to a point where I thought to myself, like, this, I need to really challenge myself from a perspective of discipline. So I decided, right, I'm going to become a vegan, but it was more out of a decision, out of ethical choices rather than health. I was like you. I was just like, man, I see what goes on in, and I don't, I'm wise enough now not to point the finger at like farmers who are just making a living and trying to make ends meet and whatnot, whether it's been like a family tradition and that's all they know. But for me, it's always been about big business and them just wanting to make money and exploiting farmers for their, well, I suppose for the stuff that they've got. But I just don't like with you. I just don't like the way animals are treated. The fact that we use animals for our own monetary gain, it's like, to me that's sick. It's like just like using it as a tool just to make yourself richer. And I'm not saying people just do it just to become as rich as they can, but still, it's just that monetary gain.
Yeah, I think like this is where regenerative really flips everything on its back and creates a new space for meat in the future.
Yeah, well, this is. I'm going to tell you something. When I saw you put a post up about some regenerative farming symposium that you was putting on, I was like, what? Like, because I've been listening. I've been interested in regenerative farming now for, damn. I listened to a podcast from a guy called, Rich Roll.
No.
Podcast. Well, he had a guy called Zach Bush. I don't know if you've heard of Zach Bush.
I've heard of Zach Bush, yeah.
Yeah, so he's one of the foremost scientists in the field of regenerative farming and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I heard the podcast, and I was just blown away by like what he was saying. I was just like, wow, this is a big issue. Like it's not small potatoes. This is like this had far-reaching issues of where the world could literally come to a stop as we know the world as it is. And it was at that point I started thinking about, how could I find a foothold in this whole platform of getting involved in regenerative farming. So when I saw you doing this symposium, I was like, booyah! Yes! This is the foothold. So the fact that we're talking about it now, I'm just so excited. So on that note, I've got some questions for you regarding the whole regenerative. No. Well, this is the good thing is that, well, I'm no expert, and I'm assuming you're no expert too, but you may look back at this in 5 years' time and go, what the hell was I talking about? Question would be, what is regenerative farming and why is it so important?
Oh, they are great questions. I love that. Okay, I guess for me, so regenerative farming, what is it? It falls under so many umbrellas. It's different for so many people or so many farmers. But I guess what it means to me is it's about finding that connection with the land again. It's about, there's a real disconnect between, man and the landscape that supports him. We've forgotten where our roots come from. We've forgotten what it is to produce food, or rather what the land can produce and what we call it as food. I think ultimately regenerative agriculture is looking at nature's natural rhythms and cycles, with importance to or an emphasis on healing the soil.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is the soil structure.
It's rejuvenation of the soil, and farming in a way that's that produces high dense, nutrient dense food in nature's image. It's probably what it is to me. Why is it important? I mean, that's a massive topic. But essentially, it's important because it looks at not just healing the soil, and as a result of that producing high density and or rich foods, but it's also a social, economical, ecological, global issue, and it can help sequester carbon out of the atmosphere and back into the soil, which is it's just a huge thing in terms of climate change. So if we can start reversing the effects of climate change by pulling the carbon back into the soil, then we can also start to grow really healthy food and build resilience on our farms and our communities, because we're not going to be subject to the weather so much, or at least we can weather the edges of the season better. If we have a drought or a flood, the soil can handle it like it used to. I guess.
Yeah, that's the one big thing that I took out of some of the stuff that I've been hearing, is the cellular biology makeup of the soils. At the moment, at the moment, it's so bad to the point where if there's like a large rain, the topsoil just gets washed away off the land into the rivers, whatever, and you're just left with the bare kind of lacking of nutrient on the soil itself. But with regenerative farming, it enables the soil to become more sponge-like, so it's able to take in water more, which then has the knock-on effect of less flooding during the wet season, but at the same time during the dry season, the droughts are much easier to manage at the same time.
Oh, totally. I completely agree. And it's like looking at life as a whole living system. It's it's like the life cycle or a circular system. And I guess that's where the livestock come into it. They're very much part of the life cycle. And so without the livestock, we can't, or it's very difficult to produce soil. They're definitely a huge influencer on growing and producing more organic matter in our soils. And so from my perspective, although I'm sort of adopting a vegan diet, I certainly see the value in livestock. Like we can't really farm sustainably or at least regeneratively without livestock. And I think that they play a really integral role in that. So they shouldn't. There's a really cool Facebook group called the Ethical Omnivore, and it's some of the stuff this chick I'm assuming it's a chick. She puts out some hilarious stuff.
Just ask her to cough and or get the Adam's apple. Can you just lift your head back a little bit?
Yeah. She puts out some great stuff. She slates vegans, she really does. But she's got some points though, to be fair. Like but where I'm coming from, it's more, the livestock are integral to a life cycle system, and maybe we don't have to eat so much meat, but we definitely need them to help produce more carbon in our soils.
Yeah, like to give if anyone is listening, I'm expecting my listenership to go up by about 3 to but to at least 10 after this one, because I feel like this is quite important.
Um, because I'm on.
But yeah, of course.
But,
To give people an idea of how much dire trouble we're in when it comes to our state of our soils. The last count, and this isn't me just kind of making a wild stab in the dark. This was from the science itself. They reckon that there is no more than between 50 and 60 harvests left in the world with regards to feeding everyone. Like that's less, 50 years of just
it's
soil
crazy.
that could feed people, and then after that the soil's going to die and won't be able to sustain any kind of growth or anything,
And
because of the type of practices that we currently do, like monoculture and stuff like that.
So like a lot of that is, I'm understanding, is like production for CAFO farming, which is like those big factory farms or ranching where they're producing meat, and that, like people are like, oh, it's so from my view, it's not the farmer's fault. Like,
No.
It's a society led us down here. We all wanted cheap food, and the chemical companies jumped on board on that and said we can produce cheap food and high yields because the world is starving. We need to feed the world. And it made the farmers feel good for a while because they were saving lives, evidently. But food insecurity isn't a production issue. We can vastly afford to feed the world twice over. It doesn't look like we're going to have any food insecurity issues for at least the next 20 to 30 years. It's not a production issue, it's a distribution issue. We're producing this food, and all of this food is soybeans or corn, and it's produced on mass scale to feed livestock, which then feeds probably 2% of the world's population. So, and people, I don't think people realize, but human consumption, 70% of human consumption, so vegetables, that is produced on less than 5 acres per farm, and that is 70% of the world's human. So we actually don't need that much land to support the world in terms of for human consumption, at least. So
I heard a wise man once say that the world has enough for everyone's need, but not everyone's greed.
Oh, I love that.
You can take that one. That was Mahatma Gandhi. But that's true. It's a true it's a true sentiment.
That's so true. Yes. Yes.
And it goes to show when you say that so much land is used up just for 2% of the population.
Yeah. I mean, well,
it's insane.
We've got it all wrong. It's the agriculture is going down the wrong road. We're trying to we're having a reductionism or a reduction approach to things, which is saying that we'll take nature and put it into small boxes and make a machine out of it. It was never going to work like that. It's messy and unorganized chaos. But it's beautiful and simple, and everything works, and everything has its place and its role. And everyone talks about competition. We were told, yield, production, competition. I went to agriculture university, and that's what they said to us. You've got to kill things, to grow things. And I hit a point in my career just probably 2 years ago, and I was like, I don't understand why farmers are going broke. I don't understand why we need to use chemicals to grow things. We kill stuff to grow stuff. Didn't make sense. And at the end of the day, like, these chemicals and artificial synthetic fertilizers we're putting on, that's going straight into us. And no wonder we've high rates of depression and obesity and all that sort of stuff. It's you are what you eat, and what we're eating is crap. We do, and this is where regenerative comes in, because it heals the soil. Without soil, you don't have life.
Actually, I took the liberty of writing down a few stats when it comes to
Oh my God.
what why it's important to adopt regenerative soil practices because of the diminishing nutrient, like you were saying before, the diminishing nutrients that you find in food nowadays. So, for instance, this all comes from the USA, which is weird.
Okay.
They're the ones that have the most problems when it comes to
Yeah.
nutrient less
Yeah.
foods. So at the moment, 1 in 3 males are infertile, and 1 in 4 females are infertile.
Oh my
Nuts!
God.
And
Are
they
you
and they
serious? Because of
yeah
nutrition.
yeah because of the nutritional value of the food that they're eating.
Oh my God.
That's like a third and a quarter of the population are becoming infertile because they haven't got the right nutrients in their body. Literally
Wow.
nuts. Yeah.
Crazy.
Like for instance, they were talking about like the difference between like the chronological age and your biological age.
Yes.
So the aging effect, like a large percentage. I didn't actually write it down here, but a lot of people their biological ages surpasses their chronological age
Oh my
because they're
God.
aging so much quicker because of the foods that they're eating. Like I know from some research that was done just from the types of food you eat will depend upon your aging process, and
Yeah.
that was one of the big reasons why I went plant-based was
Yeah.
because
Me
um,
too.
I don't want to be that kind of person who is suffering from some chronic disease in the future when I can stop it from happening right now by
Yeah.
I stop eating. Now, when I say stop eating meat, I don't think my neighbor next door is going to have a chronic disease from eating meat because he goes out into the wilderness and actually gets his own meat.
Wild.
So
Yeah.
it's a fresh, natural meat, so to
Yeah.
speak,
It's
isn't it?
eating.
Hasn't
Yeah.
got antibiotic, hasn't got hormones being pumped into it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. 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 I totally agree. That's my argument with regenerative, and and yeah, wild caught animals, like they haven't been held against their will. They're not been, they're able to exhibit natural behavior, and you're like exactly your point. They're not injected with hormones. They don't have antibiotics, and then they're not fed stuff that they wouldn't usually eat. And yeah, I agree. But that's so fascinating because I was on my Fitness Pal, and I was like, you can work out your biological age. And so I'm 30, and my biological age was 36. And I
Oh,
was like,
really?
you're kidding me. Yeah. And I was like, damn it. It's serious, like 6 years older than I should be. And I just thought, oh my God, I don't want to be that
That
person that's from chronic illness.
is that online? Can you do that online?
You like do it on my Fitness Pal. Like you just go onto the app, and then they sort of work out like you do your height and your age and what you eat and your physical activity and stuff, and it works it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it goes down to like the iota of like the type of foods that you eat, like as in are you a meat eater or vegetarian or
Yeah, do you eat dairy? Are you vegan? Yeah, all of that sort of stuff. Yeah.
well, there you go. You've heard it here first on Chatting Up the Chick.
True story.
Oh, I might try that out then.
Yeah.
I'm kind of scared as well because I'd hate to
Yeah.
think that it turns around and goes, actually, Chris, you're reaching 50. Was that 50?
Yeah. Sorry, say that again. I didn't pick that up. Yeah. Oh, bugger. Anyway, what other facts?
Oh yeah, so talking about the chronic diseases, in the 1960s, only 4% of the US population, 4% had chronic diseases. Now, come up to 2015, this is nuts. 46% of children have chronic diseases.
Oh my God, are you kidding me?
And this all comes from the food that they eat and where the food comes from.
Wow. That's ridiculous.
It's nuts,
E-
isn't it? Like,
Like, that is just so. I heard that like the nutritional value of an orange or a tomato, about 50 years ago had X amount, and now it's something like 3/4 less nutrients than what it used to 50 years ago.
Mm.
And that really is because our soils are depleted of nutrients. And and a lot of people say to me, oh well, like if farming's working, like we're doing okay, we're producing, but we're not. We're like farmers, scientists, we're now finding that our production curves are dropping despite the fact that we're putting on more chemical and we're putting on more fertilizer. We're still having declined yields, and that's because we're trying to produce food off land that just doesn't have the capability to do it anymore.
Mm.
There isn't the soil biology or net, to support the food or the growth of the so. Gee, and that is case in point. Like we just don't have the nutrients to survive and produce healthy bodies anymore. It's like, what are we doing to ourselves? We're slowly
Well,
killing ourselves.
well, it's crazy as well because
It's
like
like,
yeah, at the moment life expectancy is going up, but that's more to do with how medical technology and being able to sustain people, but the quality of life. I can't prove this, but I can only assume like the quality of life in some people is just dramatically going down and down, or the fact that the people that are surviving so well and pushing the life expectancy up are so healthy because of I don't know they grow their own foods and whatnot.
yeah,
That's what's pushing it up, and so
yeah.
all the other people are just dying because of all the chronic diseases and stuff like that. I can't prove that. I can't prove it.
Okay, don't quote me. Don't quote me.
Yeah. Don't go me on this. Right, I've got another question for you.
Um,
Why do you think there's such a slow uptake in regenerative farming? Now, I'm only assuming that there is. I can't tell you for sure that that's the case, but I'm assuming that that's probably correct to some degree, that there is a slow uptake. Do you
yeah,
know why?
there is. I've asked the question to other regenerative farmers, that same question, why? And I just want to add, it is really, really rapidly changing. Like much more people are learning about it. It's becoming much more talked about, and there are huge or large groups now expanding across the world now that are really into. I mean, like Kiss the Ground is one example in America, and
Love them. I'm
uh,
gonna go and visit. Gonna go and
yeah.
spend some time on their hemp farm and try and work
Oh,
out how to be a
yes.
farmer.
Wow.
That's my plan anyway. That's my plan.
Wow, that's actually so cool. Wow. Yeah, good shit. Yeah. So there is this movement and it's great, but I think the reason why there's a slow uptake is I think it's like anything, change has to be driven by emotion. History has shown us that you cannot change by science. We had this science 50 years ago and we all knew about it, but no one wanted to do anything because it wasn't driven by emotion. So I think, like it's the whole, you can't change anyone. They have to change themselves if they want to change. And I really think that you can't really change someone. They have to change, and it has to be a shift in mindset. You have to be. I think the reason why this has come about is because farmers are at breaking point. They're on their knees. They're trying to produce more. They're subject to supply and demand. They're spending thousands on fertilizer and chemical products, and not getting the return in production, and they're going bankrupt. And this is why farmers have 30% more suicide rates compared to any other industry, and construction being the next one down. They really are on their knees, and it's at times like this that they're open to change and they want to change and find a solution. And regenerative is a solution that doesn't cost anything, and it certainly doesn't cost the earth. You can start making changes really rapidly, and see big changes quite rapidly. Because you can start to build organic matter percentage within a year. There's farms that have increased their organic carbon soil by a percent, like 1%, and that gives 144,000 liters of water holding capacity on the soil. You know, that's a huge, that's about 2 months worth of extra, you know, growth really on the farm. So I think it's trying to bring back that connection to the land. We really have lost it. Like farmers used to be able to smell the soil, and it would smell earthy and beautiful, and you'd break it apart and it'd look like chocolate cake, and there'd be worms and all this sort of stuff in it, and you know, you could really smell the very essence of life. Now we've just degraded it, the reductionist approach, and there's nothing nice about it anymore. And I think farmers are finally now, they're fed up, enough is enough. You know, they sort of want to say, you know, fuck you, chemical companies. We've done everything you've said, and yet still we're not making any money. You're not helping us. But I think why it's taken a long time is the change in mindset. And farmers especially, you know, they like to talk to other farmers and hear their experiences. You know, they're creatures of habit, and to break that habit is difficult unless there are other pioneer farms in the field that are leading the way. And also,
especially,
governments need to step up as well. But yeah.
Well, it's certainly a case in point. Like, if you're a doctor, you know, you're not going to go to, say, a greengrocer and start asking them their advice about how their job's done. You know. So do you think I should tell my patients to go and go and inject themselves with some sort of disinfectant to get rid of COVID? No, I kid, of course, I kid. But yeah, it makes sense that farmers talk to each other. But if farmers are talking to each other and they're talking to each other in the same narrative, that's the problem, isn't it? Where, you know, someone says, "Oh yeah, I had a good season this season because I used this, I don't know, Roundup or whatever," and then all of a sudden the other farmers are like, "Oh, why would he lie to me, or why would she lie to me?" So they continue that circle, but then, like you said, to realise that it doesn't actually work. Like, for instance, I heard that after one application of Roundup, that can kill up to 50% of the earthworms in the soil. And without the earthworms, you don't have the aerobic activity going through the soil to allow the air and the movement of air through the soil to be able to become a good solid soil. So you've got no earthworms, like they say, you've got no earthworms, you've got crap soil. It's as simple as that.
It's so true. And I think a lot of it is education. You know, we've lost sight of it. So from my angle, and rightly or wrongly, like from my point of view, is it stems from education. So we were taught that soil was a chemical thing. It was, you know, nitrogen and potash and phosphate, and they were the three main components you needed to grow something. And well, we needed to feed the world, so shit, we better start applying that stuff. When really we really are starting to listen to science now, which is it's a biological thing. You know, it's an ecological process in the soil. But you know, the education it comes from Bayer and Monsanto, who are putting the money into our universities and then telling us, hey, by the way, you know, you need to spray 5 times on your wheat crop. And
they're the same thing now, Bayer and Monsanto, because Bayer bought them out. Yeah, Bayer bought them out. Because there was all from what I understand is there was all these people taking Monsanto to court for carcinogenic of the use of their products, and one person won their court case, and I think they got awarded something like $2 million or something like that, and then all of a sudden Monsanto got sold to Bayer. And now, no, Monsanto doesn't exist anymore. So how can you sue something that doesn't exist?
That is so bad. Oh my god.
Yeah, It's nuts, man. Absolutely nuts. Like it just baffles me. Like sometimes, how easily people are kind of drawn in to a certain storyline that they're told without actually taking the time to go through and see if that story is actually valid. And
Yeah.
it's the same like with this whole idea of regenerative farming is only now becoming serious is because we realize now we've completely fucked up the soils. Like,
Yeah, we don't have a choice. The
no.
thing is, we don't have a choice anymore, so we have to do something. Yeah, it's dumb.
Yeah,
Yeah.
look, I've got some more stats for you because
Oh,
I'm stats man.
okay.
So this, yeah, this is in regards to if we didn't change our behaviors in how we manage our soils. These are some of the stats that don't ask me how they came up with it, but this comes from the mouth of Zach Bush himself. So I assume that is at least 87% correct.
Okay. Yeah.
So they reckon within the next maybe 20-25 years, I'm not sure completely, but just as a ballpark kind of figure,
Yeah.
half the population will get some sort of cancer.
Wow.
That's what they reckon.
Wow.
There's also the rates of autism will double in children.
Yeah.
So that's basically, they reckon it will get to the point where there's like 1 in every 36 children in the USA will have autism. So that's
Wow.
like 1 child per classroom almost. If you
Yeah.
kind of a classroom being about 30 kids.
Yeah.
Obviously, increase in mental health issues because the whole world has gone mental health insane. Like I heard some crazy stat that up to 60% of people in Los Angeles are on some sort of Prozac, some sort of antidepressant.
Yeah.
Like,
What?
shit.
It's just boggles the mind.
And the worst thing about all these kind of stats, especially for America, because again, comes from a guy who lives in America and he studies in America and he does all this science in America. But he rightly pointed out at the end, he's like, who's going to pay for all this healthcare down the
Yeah.
line? Like it not only is it a burden on the people themselves, but it's going to be a burden on society. It's going to make it much more. Everything's going to degrade basically, whether it comes from and this all comes from just the state of your soil. Like that's the big point of it all, is the fact that if you can't take it seriously, that the state of the world's soils needs to change quickly. And look, I understand the whole idea of climate change and this whole push to stop climate change, and you hear about stopping CO2 levels rising and stuff like that, which to some degree, and someone did rightly point out to me, higher levels in CO2 does naturally mean higher warming of the planet. But in some ways, that's actually good because you can actually grow things more with higher levels of CO2.
Yeah.
And if anything, if we stop CO2 levels from rising, we could actually go back into some sort of an ice age, which is actually going to be worse for humanity because we won't actually be able to grow much because it's going to be cold.
Like also.
Yeah, so there is two to discussion, but the fact of the matter is that when these discussions are being had, you never hear anything about the state of the world's soils. It's all about we need to bring down the use of personal vehicles. We need to stop using coal, which I'm totally in agreement with. I'm like, if you can cycle, we cycle, because I don't want to breathe in the shit that's coming out of your exhaust because it's not good. It's full of carbon monoxide, all kinds of oxide, night, blah blah blah. I was never good at chemistry, but the fact that you never hear these discussions about people saying, now how can we make our soils more healthy? You never hear it.
It's so true. And there's a really cool documentary called Cowspiracy, which you might be referencing to it which points that out. It's true. You never hear about the soil, and the thing is, like, the soil is the world's largest living organism. You know, it literally breathes. It holds water, it bleeds, it's living, it's alive. Without it, there is no life. You know, and then yet we're treating it like dirt. We really do, and it's so crucial for the future of humanity that we treat this soil as our largest and most precious asset, and we start regenerating it, and and rejuvenating it back to a state where we can actually start having some sort of quality of life.
Yeah, and my what the other kind of sub question I was going to ask was what can we as consumers do to help this kind of transition? Because I think from my perspective, the fact that we as consumers overconsume to start off with is an issue. So we're putting pressure onto farmers to make bad decisions because we're expecting a certain level of whatever it might be. That would be my one thing about what I could do personally is be consuming less and putting less pressure on those farmers who are just trying their best to do what they can with the knowledge that they have.
Yeah, that's a really hard question. I think about that all the time. Like, what can the consumer do to encourage regenerative farming? I guess it's all about awareness, I guess, and being aware of this type of farming. But it's sort of difficult. You don't want to fall down the trap of, organic. I don't quite know which direction regenerative will go. I'd like to hope that all farming practices become regenerative, and that we don't label it as a certified product.
Because it then becomes a pseudo thing, doesn't it? It's like I'm organic. How are you organic? Well, I've got a long drop, and I took the remnants of my long drop and put it into my market garden. It's all organic.
Yeah, yeah. And and plus organic farmers, there's not all, and this is stereotyping, obviously not all organic, but there is a trap of ticking a box and getting organic status and then collecting your premium for it without realizing the reason why, which is to heal the soil. That's the reason why organic came about, was to heal the soil. And it's just, man, that's such a, I don't know if I can really answer that question, what the consumer can do. I guess really start to think and analyze where your food comes from, and what's been sprayed on it, and is that the type of the food that you want to be eating? Is that the nutritional value you want? And ultimately making your buying choices in line with what's good for your health and the environment. But it's a drop in the ocean,
Like, do you know much about like you have your kind of grocery stores that are on the back of like big paddocks where they're growing their own food? Do you know if that's different to, say, the kind of groceries that you would find, say, in New World or Countdown? Or
I think like the difference is when it goes to a supermarket, they more often than not have to spray a preservative on the vegetable to make it last and appear fresh. Whereas if it's like a farm shop, market garden style, they're sort of cutting out the distribution. It's going straight from the farm into the shop that it's sold in, and therefore it's fresher. You've not got a week's lag. But I 100% don't know.
Okay. No, I was just intrigued to see whether it was worthwhile people rather going to a designated grocery place rather than.
Supporting local, you're always going to have fresher food, and it's going to be seasonal food as well. So it's definitely wouldn't have all the sprays and chemicals that they have to put on out of season food in order to keep it fresh and preserved. Would be my guess.
I was just thinking from a perspective of regenerative farming, that it would actually be a positive. But I suppose I
Yeah.
don't know for sure. I suppose it's different for each place and where they get it from.
Yeah, I think like you're targeting the conscious buyer, like normal, like the normal 80%, 90% of the population just buy out of convenience. But yeah, like if you're a conscious consumer, then yeah, I would totally agree. Like buying your food locally from, your market gardener or your farm shop would be a sensible way to go, because A, it's like less carbon emissions being produced, and B, it's fresher produce.
Right. Well, as we wind down this conversation, which has been fantastic, I've got one more question for you. And do you know what it means when someone says when we're winding down? It just means that some people are thinking, "Geez, man, this is going on. When are they going to finish?" Like we could go on for another half an hour from this question, but at least I'm saying we're winding down.
Good to go.
Hey, look, this question might mean that we stop like literally in the next 30 seconds, because you'll be like, I don't know.
Call me in 5 years time.
Yeah. Are there any specific success stories of regeneration that you know of?
Yeah, there's a few. Yeah, there's some few farmers in New Zealand that I know of success stories. There's quite a big group of farmers in South Otago, probably around 30, could be more farmers now, that have adopted this regenerative systems approach. And Hamish Balsky and his wife Amy are one of those farmers, and they were similar to Limburn Station, which was aired on Country Calendar a couple of weeks ago, of the regeneration, and they kind of stumbled across. They took on the farm, and they thought, damn it, how are we going to make money out of this? And the normal conventional way wasn't going to serve them very well, and pretty much over the last 6 years, they took quite a bold step and regenerated 20% of their farm. And now they're in a position where they don't use any, or they use, so they don't, as far as I know, they don't use any herbicides except for the odd use of glyphosate. Because they're farmers, they're practical, sometimes situations just don't allow it. And Hamish has really done it. His theory is, it's not whether regenerating agriculture is good or bad. It's just that every action has a consequence. So he knows that spraying glyphosate is going to kill his soil biology, but he also needs to be able to plant a crop within a short space of time, because the weather conditions just don't allow it, for example. Or he has to get on his tractor to pull that cow out for whatever reason, and he knows it's going to produce carbon emissions, but he has to remain quite down to earth and realistic at the same time. But they're running a really nice, successful sheep and beef farm now, and I think they've cut down their man hours considerably on the tractor. There's another farmer in South Otago, Shane Robertson. He went from running his tractor every day to now he spends 10 hours a year on his tractor with this regenerative system, and he works a maximum of 3 hours a day in summer on the farm, and that's just shifting breaks. So he's decided that's another success story where he's decided to use regenerative to really not only produce healthy food and a thriving ecosystem, but also that really nice work-life balance that he was missing and lacking,
Yeah, because one of the issues that I understand from typical ways of farming and regenerative ways is the way the land is tilled. Tilling is actually bad for the land, and because it releases all this it releases the carbon from within the
Yeah.
soil itself. And when farmers were actually asked, why do you till, a large percentage of them wasn't because it was some sort of farming practice to help them for the next kind of yield or whatever. It was more aesthetics, just to make their paddock look nice. So it didn't have all the weeds and stuff popping through and whatnot. So yeah, that was like a shock to me. I was like, wow.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's crazy what what people will tell you. We learned that at university. You till the land, you till to create a seed bed usually, or if you're organic, you would use tillage to kill weeds. But yeah, like 100% with regeneration or regenerative agriculture, we embrace weeds. We actually say, hey, look, the weeds are a great indication of what's going on under the soil. This weed means we've got a lack of phosphate. This weed means there's aeration problems. Let's just embrace it. And ultimately, nature's principles, aren't competitive, it's collaborative. So yes, there's competition between weeds, but the weeds are nature's way of covering the soil. It's saying, whoa, we got some bare soil here. We don't want to risk losing it through erosion of the wind and the rain, so we'll cover it with roots to hold it in place. And then once we've done that and it's covered, then we can let the native species come through. The weeds will naturally die back, and you've got a nice equilibrium kind of ecosystem that just supports itself collaboratively.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's the ecosystem. It's we don't see what's going on with regards to how each different animal or insect or whatever it might be, how it interacts with the land itself. Like I was just thinking to myself, hey, like you could have a blackbird coming into the paddock, sees himself a nice little grub, eats the grub, poos it out, and look, there's your natural fertilizer straight there. Straight
it's that simple. It's like literally that simple. It's complex. That's so simple. Like, why? It just boggles me. I don't understand why humans have like overlooked it. We want to control stuff. It's like, just know, you know what? Just let go of the control. Let it go. Just
I'll give you two things that that comes to mind when I think of regenerative farming or regenerative practices. And the first one is there was a place, I think I learned this one from Kiss the Ground. They were talking about a couple that started practicing regenerative forms in their farm, and it came to the height of the summer season, and all the farms around them were brown, dry, just looked like a desolate, dead wasteland. Their farm was all green and lush, and all the other farmers were coming around going, how the hell is your farm still green and lush? Where have you been like pumping water or like no, this is just part of our regenerative way of farming, where their soil structure is able to retain the moisture and keep that moisture level at a point where everything still keeps to grow. And straight away it was just that notion that all these other guys or girls just started joining in with this regenerative process because it was visible, it was there for them to see, and they couldn't believe it. They were like, we didn't even know that this was a thing.
I mean, this is just such a great example. I mean, the thing is, like, if you just leave nature alone, it'll sort itself out. It's because of human intervention that we are where we are today. Like, like just it's self-organizing. It's a living system. It's diversity, and that's the key to just this, I guess, sustaining life. So,
my second thing was my own veggie patch.
Ah.
Like I don't use sprays, I don't use fertilizers. I have my own composting system. So once I compost, I spread it all over my backyard. But the one thing that I've realized is, like you were saying, just let nature do its thing. Because I'm not worried about like birds and coming to eat my figs or my plums or whatever. I'm quite happy for them to munch on my strawberries and whatnot, because what that inevitably does is that they come in and they start taking away the things that could start destroying my crops, i.e. slugs, snails, aphids on roses and stuff like that, because the birds come in and take them out.
Yeah.
So I'm allowing nature to take its course, and I don't have to do anything. I don't need to spray. I don't need to get out some spray and start spraying the aphids or start trying to kill slugs and all that kind of stuff, because the birds do it for me. Just because I allow them to do strawberries and have their fill.
I love that, and that is that's ultimately what what regenerative agriculture is trying to do. It embraces nature's laws and says, yeah, it's okay for there to be weed, and that's the difference as well. Like in a monoculture or monocropping system, it's really easy for like aphids, for example, to go in and wipe the whole crop out because it's one single crop. Whereas if you had a diversity of crops, other plants are going to have more resistance than others, and they can pick up that there's a pest or an invader coming in, and you just don't lose massive amounts of crop from it. So you never see a monoculture in nature.
No, definitely. Hey, look, dude, man, this has been a great conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. Maybe we should have a part 2, because I was going to get on to GM foods and stuff like that, and what you think about that.
Yeah, I know. Cool.
Oh, you have a question for me?
Yeah, I have a question for you. Can I go?
Oh yeah. I'll just delete it out. Don't worry.
Oh, okay, sweet. Thanks. Oh my god. Okay, okay. This is the one thing I want. Okay, so in your opinion, why is regenerative agriculture important?
Did I not answer earlier? I'm sure I answered that earlier.
Sure you didn't. Let me ask you another one.
I think it's important, just from the fact that if we don't change the way we're doing things within 50 years, we're not going to have food. So okay, there you go.
Okay. Okay, fine. My other question is, in your opinion, what is the difference between sustainable and regenerative? That's right.
That's one of those ones where you have to really think, didn't you? Because because initially you'd think they entwine within each other. That for something to be sustainable, it has to be regenerative at the same time. Otherwise, if you just have some sort of regenerative process that only lasts for X amount of years and then it just pithies away, then it's not very sustainable, because you're back to square one. Then you're like, oh crap, now what do I do? The soil seems to be degrading because I haven't put into place a regenerative process that actually continual.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one,
What's your question?
Yeah.
Give you an example.
Someone said to me that sustainability is just a slower way to die, because we we don't really want to sustain where we're at presently. We want to rejuvenate our systems back to a state of health. But yeah, to be sustainable, you're very true. It does need to be able to it needs to be self-rejuvenating in order for it to sustain. So yeah, it's a tricky one.
Well, and also it depends on what you mean by sustainability, because some people have a real warped sense of what sustainable is. Yeah. It's like I've got a coffee cup that's a sustainable coffee cup. Yeah, but it's made of plastic. Yeah, but I can use it again and again. And again. Yeah, but what about when you don't need it anymore? What are you going to do with it? Oh, it's just in the bin. Oh, where's that go? It gets recycled. And how do you know that? So it all depends on your mindset as well. For me, it's like it's good that you're no longer using single-use things, because they're just the scourge of the planet. But at the same time, it's like we need to redo things completely, to the point where you don't even need a sustainable cup. You use things that are already there, that are going to be used again and again and again and again and again, not your own thing that you take in to use and call it sustainable.
Totally. Like a product out of a circular system, I guess. Yeah, cool. Nice.
Damn, I'm coming up quick with these analogies, aren't I?
Good.
Was it? Yes. Be vegan.
Oh my god. I mean, you can't argue with it though. You really can't.
Hey, well, if this doesn't get guys to be a vegan, then
I know. Step outside. Come on, think about the performance. You owe us one. No. Awesome. I love this chat. This was so good. Thank you very much.
No. I appreciate you coming on. And again, we'll have to do another one for other questions that I wanted to come up with.
Yeah, I'm very keen. Thank you.
Sweet dude.